Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. A rainy Monday morning smothered Manhattan under a dense curtain of heavy raindrops. The city seemed to stand still, as if holding its breath. 35 stories above the chaos of the street, the Lane and Royce headquarters was bathed in a dreary gray light, filtered through the immense bay windows in the building's south corner. Streaks of water crashed against the glass in an irregular rhythm, mixing white noise with diffuse tension. In the CEO's vast office, everything seemed perfectly aligned. The dark wood designer furniture, the minimalist artwork hanging on the walls, the white orchids on the coffee table. And in the center, two human beings whose apparent calm belied a looming storm. Victoria Lane, 48, razor-sharp in her tailored black suit, stood with one hand resting on the edge of her glass desk. Her gaze, usually icy but measured, had a rare intensity this time. Far from the courteous tone she used with her subordinates, her voice was dry, direct, almost sharp as she made her request. I need you to release $2 million immediately. The transfer is confidential. I will provide you with the details in due course. Daniel Mercer, 52, the managing director, was across the room, leaning against the conference table. His impeccable midnight blue suit and discreet Swiss watch, everything about him exuded the accomplished businessman, sure of his place. He had worked alongside Victoria for 15 years. They had weathered crises, mergers, and mass layoffs together. But he had never seen her so enigmatic, almost opaque. He slowly crossed his arms, observing the CEO with that professional restraint he wielded so well. "I'm sorry, Victoria," he said calmly, "but I can't approve this. There's no clear justification for this transfer. Even you have rules to follow." He paused. "Unless there's something you want to tell me?" Victoria didn't answer. She stood there, her gaze fixed on Daniel as if she were seeing him for the first time, or rather, as if she were finally seeing him as he really was. A silence fell. Not a banal silence. A heavy, elastic silence, taut like a cello string that refuses to vibrate. One could have heard a needle drop on the waxed parquet floor. The seconds stretched, heavy as lead. The air conditioning blew weakly, almost inaudibly, while the rain intensified, hitting the windows like an army of distant drums. Victoria didn't blink. Not once. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't bother to explain. She had never liked explanations, and even less so justifications. For 7 long minutes, she stared at him. 7 minutes that seemed like an eternity to Daniel, whose breathing had become shallower without him realizing it. He tried to meet her gaze, but after the 4th minute, he subtly looked away, a movement almost imperceptible, but not to her. For Victoria, this gesture was tantamount to a confession. At the 7th minute, she finally took a breath, as if emerging from a trance. She turned away without saying a word, took 3 steps toward the coffee corner of her office, picked up her cup of tea, now lukewarm, and took a sip. Then she calmly put down the cup, slightly adjusted the sleeve of her suit, and, with a fluid and controlled gesture, turned on her heel. The only thing that accompanied her departure was the silent click of her heels on the floor as she walked out the door without ever looking back. Daniel, left alone in the office, didn't immediately understand what had just happened. He naively thought the matter was closed, that Victoria had accepted his refusal. But something behind his back, something icy and definitive, hovered like an omen. An invisible weight had just fallen on his shoulders. He didn't yet know that those 7 minutes had just sealed his fate. 9:42. The audible alert, discreet but insistent, sounded on Daniel Mercer's screen. He glanced distractedly at his inbox. A single message, marked urgent, had just appeared. Subject, immediate end of contract, Daniel Mercer. Sender, Victoria Lane, CEO. Recipient, Daniel Mercer. Copy, Legal Department, Human Resources. Daniel's blood ran cold. He clicked in disbelief, first thinking it was a mistake, a bad joke, a computer glitch. But no, the content was clear, surgical. Mr. Mercer, I hereby inform you that your contract with Lane and Royce is terminated with immediate effect. Your access to computer systems is suspended as of this notification. Please return your personal belongings to the executive assistant as soon as possible. You will be contacted by our legal department for final arrangements. Victoria Lane, CEO. He stood there, his eyes wide, rereading the message once, twice, 3 times, 10 times. Each word seemed sharper than the last. He felt an immense weight crush his chest. The office suddenly seemed too big, too empty, too quiet. Beyond the glass partition, the employees, immersed in their screens, seemed to know. Something in the air had changed, as if an invisible storm had swept across the floor. Eyes were shifty. Keyboards had gone silent. The company, for a moment, had stopped breathing. Then, as if in a choreographed scene, Evelyn, Victoria's personal assistant, entered without knocking. She was elegant, measured, and quietly efficient. Her face, though impassive in all circumstances, revealed a hint of gravity. She was holding an empty cardboard box in her arms, one of those anonymous boxes that had only one meaning in a glass tower like this. She placed it on the corner of Daniel's desk without a word at first. "She asked me to help you gather your things," she said calmly. His voice was soft, almost compassionate, but his tone brooked no negotiation. "She doesn't want you to meet the press. A vehicle is already waiting for you at the secondary entrance. Your badge is deactivated." Daniel sat up abruptly, his jaw clenched, his temples throbbing. "Is she serious? For a legitimate refusal? For simply doing my job?" His voice rose into a treble, betraying a tension he could no longer control. He had run this company almost hand in hand with her for over a decade. He had endured sleepless nights, stifled doubts, and steered the ship through a financial storm. He had saved this company more than once. And now he was being thrown out like an ordinary employee, without a meeting, without an explanation, without a glance. Evelyn, however, did not flinch. She stared at him with a kind of cold tenderness, a mixture of past admiration and present lucidity. "It wasn't just a refusal, Daniel," she said in a barely audible voice. She paused, letting her words fall like a sharp blade. "It was a test, and you failed." What Daniel Mercer didn't know that morning was that Victoria Lane wasn't actually looking to raise $2 million for a project. That project didn't exist. For several months, Lane and Royce's heart had been beating with a dull anxiety. Key strategic documents, confidential information about impending mergers, product launch plans, everything was leaking. Someone, somewhere, was sabotaging Victoria's tireless efforts. Someone she had believed in. A traitor. She had felt it, first as a furtive shadow in her reports, in the glances exchanged during strategic meetings, in heavy silences. Then suspicion had become certainty. It was a betrayal both cold and pernicious, and she could not accept it. This test, this false project, this calculated deception, was nothing more than a mirror held up to Daniel. A final test of loyalty. 2 truths were hidden behind this simple refusal. First, by vetoing it without question, Daniel was revealing that he knew things he shouldn't. Something he couldn't ignore. Victoria had dropped clues, observed the flaws, and she had a feeling Daniel knew, or at least suspected, the existence of this traitor. But he remained silent. Second, by refusing to follow blindly, he was asserting that he would not follow her if she decided to act outside the rules, even temporarily. Daniel embodied what Victoria secretly despised in her senior management: bureaucratic rigidity, obsessive adherence to procedures, even when the company's survival sometimes required bending the rules. For Victoria, this refusal was not a simple disagreement. It was a declaration of independence. And in her world, in this world where she reigned supreme, independence had no place for those who wore a director badge. Victoria Lane didn't share power. She wielded it alone, without compromise, without weakness. For her, a right-hand woman who refused a directive, even disguised as a request for confidential funds, automatically became a danger, a threat to be eliminated. Evening was slowly falling over Manhattan, bathing the glass towers of the Upper East Side in an icy orange glow. The offices had emptied, leaving behind an almost religious silence. Only the 35th floor, a sanctuary of power and irreversible decisions, remained lit. Victoria Lane, standing as straight as an antique statue behind her immense walnut desk, leafed through the day's reports without emotion. An untouched glass of champagne waited on a low table, a silent witness to a postponed celebration. At 8:17 p.m., Evelyn, his assistant, entered quietly, carrying a sealed black folder. "The report," she said simply. Victoria looked up. She already knew what that file contained. She'd sensed it for a long time, almost smelled it in the air Daniel left behind. But she wanted proof. And Evelyn, as always, had brought it. Victoria opened the folder and discovered confidential exchanges between Daniel Mercer and Miles Donovan, one of the most influential and discreet members of the board. The printouts were arranged chronologically. She read them, page after page, her relentless gaze scrutinizing every word. Months of correspondence. Emails disguised as simple exchanges of opinions, slowly slipping into something murkier, more structured. Daniel spoke of his growing concerns about Victoria's solitary management. He spoke of excessive centralization, lack of transparency, and authoritarian excesses. Then, later, the euphemisms fell away. He wrote in black and white, "She can't continue to run this alone. We need to take the reins before she sinks the company with her ego." And Miles Donovan, cunning, patient, stroked him in the direction of power. "You have instincts, Daniel. She needs to be balanced. You could make an excellent president. She's at the end of her cycle. You're the future." Victoria closed the folder slowly. Her fingers were perfectly calm, almost elegant, as if they had just turned the last page of a novel she already knew by heart. She looked up at the dark Manhattan night, then turned to Evelyn. "They think I'm a tired queen." A heavy, solemn silence. Then a slight smile appeared at the corner of his lips. A smile that was almost painful to look at. There was nothing joyful about it. Nothing satisfied. Only fire. "They forgot that I was born in fire." His voice, calm and collected, echoed through the room like a promise of destruction. Evelyn knew what that meant. Victoria Lane wasn't simply punishing. She was rewriting the battlefield. She wouldn't just remove Daniel. She would shatter the foundations of this betrayal. Expose Miles Donovan. Turn the council on its head. Take back every bit of power they thought they'd taken from her. And she would do it with the grace of an empress and the ferocity of a predator who had never forgotten the bite of the cold. Because she didn't get to the top by accident. She climbed there with her bare hands, her nails bleeding, her heart of steel. And that evening, in the silence of her office, Manhattan became again what it had always been for Victoria Lane, a war zone. The weeks following Daniel Mercer's ouster were marked by a chilling excitement at Lane and Royce. No outward commotion, no public scandal. Victoria hated noise. She preferred quiet movements, the kind you only notice when it's too late. She undertook a strategic reorganization of management. Daniel's former lieutenants were transferred, dismissed, or reassigned to secondary divisions. The board of directors, still reeling from the discovery of Miles Donovan's treacherous ambitions, supported, some reluctantly, others fervently, Victoria's decisions. But the one who emerged to the forefront was Evelyn Chase. Discreet, methodical, and loyal to the core, Evelyn was appointed Director of Global Strategy, a newly created, tailor-made position. Internally, she was referred to as the new brains of Lane and Royce, a quiet, almost invisible, yet incredibly effective presence. Every expansion plan, every merger, every partnership now passed through her hands. Meanwhile, Daniel Mercer tried to rebuild his life. He sent out resumes, reached out to his contacts, and tapped into old connections. But everywhere he went, the doors remained closed. Not a single callback, not an invitation. Even startups that had courted him in the past politely declined. Some said he was too unstable, others that he had lack of judgment. In fact, he was wiped off the market without a single word being spoken against him. Victoria had no need for theatrical revenge. She had preferred something more durable. She had let the silence speak for her. One autumn morning, Daniel received a package at his home. A simple bouquet of white flowers, lilies and peonies, a symbol of purity, but also of closure. No sender visible, just a handwritten card, in handwriting he would recognize among 1,000. "Thank you for these 7 minutes. They reminded me why I am in this place." He stood there, holding his breath. 7 minutes. He understood now that they were not a whim, but a test. A mirror held up to his ambition, his fear, his betrayal. He had 7 minutes to fall in behind her. To trust her. He had chosen pride. And in Victoria Lane's world, doubt was a slow betrayal. Not loud, but final. 1 year later, Lane and Royce achieved its best financial results since its inception. Revenue exploded thanks to a controlled expansion strategy. New subsidiaries in Tokyo, Berlin, and Sao Paulo. The launch of the technology division was a stroke of genius, led by Evelyn. She was described as a rare phenomenon, visionary, rigorous, and silent as a shadow. In the media, Victoria Lane agreed to few interviews. When she spoke, it was measured, surgical, always without flourishes. She smiled rarely. She inspired fear. And yet, even her fiercest opponents acknowledged her supremacy. She does not rule with fire. She is fire. Forbes magazine, special edition, Titans of the 21st Century. In her 35th floor office, the windows continued to overlook Manhattan, and Victoria watched. She no longer acted on a daily basis. She steered from afar, like a strategist who has learned that true power is built through delegation, anticipation, and purification. She knew something that many did not. Power is not received. It is taken. It does not preserve itself. It defends itself. And sometimes he tests himself in 7 minutes. And she, Victoria Lane, had not only survived the ordeal. She came out of it more queen than ever.